All right, I think we are live. Let me just check here. Okay, I think we're looking good. Hey everyone, happy Sunday. Welcome to the session. Thanks for coming in. Sorry, let me let this Coast Guard chopper come over. Okay, sorry about that. Welcome everyone. Happy Sunday. I hope everyone is happy and safe and healthy on this beautiful Sunday. We're in Northern California. The skies are finally clearing. So super relieved and grateful for that. And I want to welcome you all for joining me in this session today. So we're here for our live Sacred Space session. I think it's the 28th or 29th session of the series. I am, as always, so honored to be with you in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty, and I look forward to sharing time with you in our shared sacred space together today. Okay, so what I want to do today is I'll go ahead, as I do every week, and set sacred space. And then for our overall topic, we have another folk story that Gowrie has sourced for us from her muse and intuition. So we'll tell that story. And I think the theme around this is, when we came up with it, was kind of a bit of a deeper dive into the archetype of masculine initiation, which is just so interesting to me because it will be masculine initiation, which applies to inner masculine as well, not just male initiation in terms of like boys and men in society. We'll use that as kind of like the illustrative example. But I think back in July, I did a talk on the archetype of initiation and male initiation. And we had a lot of questions from men and women around inner masculine and how does one help and facilitate the initiation and further development and forward transformation of our inner masculine, regardless of our outer gender. And so that was a question that we I've been sitting with for about a month or two, just letting it cook. And when the story came up and we read it, we realized this kind of applies to that. So we'll tell the story and then we'll go into it from that angle. We'll have a little bit of an exercise after that, and then that's it. That's what we will have for our session, and we'll close Sacred Space with our usual closing. So what I'll do now is I'll start by, let me just check and make sure Facebook is streaming properly. Okay, looking good. And I'll go ahead and begin the process of setting our sacred space together. So our intention here is to create a space for the next hour or two together, which is devoid of fear, threat, and control, in order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, however we may define that, as intuition, as guidance from a higher power, however we think of that, okay? But to set the conditions within us and supporting each other together, to have that opening within us to receive that kind of guidance, however we have become accustomed to receiving it. And to do that, we want to create this safe sanctuary space for us all to be able to relax and surrender with no fear of any danger or threat coming in from the outside or each other, so that we can partake of the nourishment, the emotional nourishment and spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. And so in opening sacred space today, I will propose that we follow the 4 principles of Presidian sacred space. The first is confidentiality, standard Vegas rules. What happens in sacred space stays in sacred space. Now, of course, we're on Crowdcast and Facebook, and the replay is publicly available as well. So the way we handle confidentiality in the online realm, especially with the niceness of how we have everything set up here, is that we do it through anonymization. So you don't have to be anonymous, but you can if you want to be. And what you would do is you would come into the Crowdcast stream you'd register and then go into your edit my profile feature and then just change your username to Mickey Mouse or Harry Potter or whatever anonymous name you'd like to choose, and then continue to chat and post questions anonymously from there. The second principle is that we just sort of agree to observe that there will be no threat or controlling, but then that extends to no fixing, no tough love, no intervening with other people, telling you something, even if it's well-intentioned and for your own good. And the reason for that is there's nothing wrong with that, but that is more of the realm of the profane. And profane is not bad, it's just profane. And in the sacred, what we do differently is that the point of being here is to do things that you can only do in the sacred, because we're only here for a couple hours a week, right? So the point here, the objective is to hold space for each other, to be how we actually find ourselves at this particular moment, right? Without the impulse to improve or strengthen or heal or cure each other or even ourselves. So space for each other and ourselves to be afraid, to be anxious, to be not okay and angry and worried, or to be happy and relaxed, and to be okay with how everything is going. And perhaps even to feel guilty and uncomfortable about that, given everything that is going on in the world. However you are, to just hold space for that, to let you sit as is. And what we found is that there is a nourishment and other kinds of magic that tends to happen from just giving yourself and others around you the protected space to be able to be in that mode. Okay. The third principle related is no commerce. So nothing may be sold in sacred space. I can't sell you anything. We can't sell things to each other. And that includes things that are recommended for monetary compensation, i.e. sold, or even recommended. So if I say, oh, there's a great book I read that will help exactly what you just described, right? That is a kind of well-intentioned, but still a kind of threat, because the implication is if you don't at least open your mind and try this book, you may lose out, right? Which is a kind of, it's still a kind of threat and controlling, however well-intentioned. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but that is more of the provenance of the profane, not of the sacred, right? So we're here just to do this specific thing. So when we are here for your energy, not for the things you bring. We are here for what you are, not for what you do or provide. And the fourth principle is that there is no expectation of participation. So there's no pressure to do anything. There's no pressure to chat or not chat. There's no pressure to post questions or not post questions. You can share and invite your friends. You can forward the post on Facebook, and you don't have to do any of that either. There's no pressure whatsoever to do anything. You can come and go as you please. Again, the nourishment comes from the held space and your presence and attention from what you are, not from what you do or provide. And all of us together will tend to amplify that. Okay, so that is what I will propose. And if you are not okay with that, that's totally okay. No fear, threat, or control for you to be okay with that either. We will just give you a moment now and pause to give you a chance to make your choice. And if you're not okay with being in sacred space, go ahead and take this moment now to withdraw from the group. And we'll still catch up with you later in profane space and hang out still, no worries at all. Okay. So I'll give you all a moment to dial into that and make your selection. Okay. All right. So for the rest of us then, we will now move forward into our shared sacred space. As we do this, I will just remind you of the four principles we're holding now: confidentiality, no fear, threat, or control, no commerce, no recommendations, and no expectation of participation. All right, so welcome to Sacred Space. Happy Sunday. I don't know about you, but it's one of the best parts of my week. So thank you for joining us here if you're new, and thank you for continuing to be with us here if you've been with us for a while now. So the overall topic we want to cover today is the archetype of masculine initiation. So in this session, we want to explore a little bit the archetype of masculine initiation to build a bit on our talk on initiation back in July. I think Gary's put up the link here. When we talked about the sacred masculine and power of initiation. And to do this, we're going to use a folktale of a forest dweller tribe in eastern India. I think it's called the Didai tribe. And explore the mythopoetics of the different aspects of initiation. So the point here is not to give a fully, comprehensive view of initiation or even masculine initiation. We've already kind of talked about that in the previous talk on this topic, but we kind of we stumbled across this story, and we decided to run with it. And when we tried to sort of figure out or discern what is the theme of this story that's kind of bringing itself to our attention, it was this theme of masculine initiation. So we'll just kind of dip into it a little bit. And I think it will bring to light some interesting aspects of the physics of initiation, right? The imperatives that initiation brings forward. We talked a couple sessions ago about the idea of story, how stories and narratives, like story and song, right, inject themselves into our lives. And if we try to suppress them, they will find a way to sort of tumble out of you into the world, right, as a kind of gift, your gift that you are to channel through you into the world. And initiation is one form of this kind of story and narrative, right? Just to take the sort of specific example of a man, a boy, a human boy, right? Progressing from boy to man, from man to king in one form or another, and then from king to sage. And then, as we've said in previous talks, there's a sort of feminine, female sort of version of that initiation progression as well. So the imperatives of this archetype, this narrative of initiation, what are its rewards, and what also are some of its inherent and anguished dangers and risks. Initiation is not a rubber stamp kind of thing. Not everyone is triggered into it, unfortunately, and not everyone makes it through, right? It's just, I mean, in classical indigenous cultures, traditional cultures all around the world, I mean, when you had full-on initiation, not all the boys and girls that would go through would actually even survive the process, right? So it is the sort of kind of anguished process that has incredible rewards, is, to me and many thinkers, a pillar of a well-functioning and balanced society and civilization. But it is one of these things that in many ways is beyond our profane control, right? And in our world where it's 99% profane, anything that sort of puts us into that risk, even emotionally, is kind of tamped down, often medicated, rightly or wrongly. And so it is a question, right? What is the role of initiation in our lives today? What are we okay with? What are we not okay with? At a societal level and even at an individual level, certainly at a family level, right? Because it's often the parents that will kind of be the facilitators, the conductors, right, of their children's paths through life as well. Okay, so anyway, that's what we want to do today. And with that introduction, I'm going to invite Gary to come back on screen here. Gary, I think I can hear you.
Hey, Artie.
Here we are. Hello. Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Hi, everyone. So good to be here. So good.
All right. Yay. Yay.
Sunday. Yeah. Thank you.
So I'll just intro this a little. So Gary and I, on our weekly call, what we've been doing the last several weeks is we will just kind of pick random stories from her intuition, right? She will sort of source the stories because you're kind of the folktale kind of nerd among the two of us, right? So these stories will present themselves to Gary, and then she'll pick the one that resonates with her the most, and then we'll both read them. And most of the time we'll read them and we'll both be like, huh? What was the point of that?
Yeah.
And then we'll kind of hold space for it, and then the pattern and shape of the symbol of the story, the archetype, the symbol of the story, i.e. symbol versus allegory, which we talked about last week, will start to emerge from there, hopefully by like Wednesday or Thursday. And then I kind of like, okay, I think this is the direction, and she'll approve, and then I'll put a topic title to it.
Right.
So an interesting pattern here is that the last 3 or 4 stories we've brought up have been these stories that revolve around the inner masculine. Right? The story and song was all about the inner masculine. The Japanese folktale about the dog Shiro was like all about inner masculine. The man who can make wither trees bloom. And now this one too. So for me, this is kind of a reflection of the masculine symbol and archetype force within us, regardless of our gender. I have an inner masculine and inner feminine. You have an inner masculine and inner feminine.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that in this time period, right, stories around the inner masculine are bubbling up for you, and then collaterally for me, and then like for everyone, because then it injects these stories are injecting themselves into life sacred space.
Yeah.
And it feels to me almost like the masculine force is presenting itself proactively for our consideration, reflection, and perhaps even for healing and reconciliation, right? In the world, of course, but also within each of us as individuals.
Right.
So that's kind of how I'm feeling about this, and yeah. So I mean, with that, Gary, I'd love to hear any thoughts you have, and then to kind of take us into the story. When you
I hear that as well, because if you see the pattern of the story, when I started with story and song, and then we had the Japanese folktale last week, and this one, it does seem like the masculine is kind of coming out in a certain pattern of transformation. And you certainly feel the presence of it. And I observed this with you when I was talking to you earlier, that there was a time when I was picking out a series of stories with strong, feminine archetypes, with the masculine feminine archetype. And it puzzled me, because I was thinking, why am I picking everything with the feminine theme? Is it because I strongly resonate, with the feminine archetype, and that's why I'm just with the bias, just choosing all feminine themes and kind of ignoring the masculine? I felt a little guilty about that. And trying to pick masculine themed stories, and I couldn't. They just weren't showing up. And suddenly now I don't know what I'm picking up, but turns out after we've figured out the shape and form, they all turn out to be masculine stories. So it's just amazing how it's almost like, one of these the sticker things where you scratch the sticker to find out what the picture is behind. And every time you scratch, it's the same kind of shape that shows up. And we're like, this is the luck today. This is what I'm getting. Yeah.
I find that it's actually even less reliable than that, because I mean, you see this all the time in live group advising when we're like reading dreams for people, but I see this all the time in my own sort of interaction with my dreams and stories that will come to me, where it's like, if you see all one pattern for a while, like all masculine, all feminine, but there are other patterns too that you can see. You see this all the time. My own first reaction, as an example, is, I don't know, like, am I just making this up? Am I just like, biasing this, like putting my thumb on the scale because I want it to be a certain way?
Right.
And and at least with the scratcher picture, you don't have that degree of freedom to sort of dismiss it. It's like, well, it was pre-printed. If it's if I flip the coin and it's heads 6 times in a row, it is what it is. With your own, when it comes to you within yourself, you have all these sort of, as we say in the high-tech world, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Or we're competing and we're trying to sort of sow the seeds of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in our competitor, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the point of bringing that up is, in hindsight, when you actually track dreams, for instance, it always turns out that it was not you like making stuff up, but the pattern was coherent. And just as you said, it's like it was all feminine, and in hindsight, it's like, yeah, it was for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like all masculine, and now we're kind of in the thick of it. We've been at this for a while, and we're like, yeah, we don't think we're just making stuff up. It's like there's a reason. We may not see the reason, but we've seen the pattern we are familiar with is that we think we're just making it up, and it always turns out that it's not. So now when we see a pattern that's kind of extraordinary, we're just relax and roll with it. You know, I don't get it yet, but we know we will. So just roll with it and keep going.
Yeah. That's how I felt with this story, because it didn't make any sense at all to start with.
No sense.
Okay,
what do you think? Should we jump in?
Should I? Yeah, I'll start with the story. Then everything that I'm talking about, it will make sense to everyone else. Otherwise, they won't know what I'm saying.
Okay. All right.
Right.
You want me to stay on camera, right?
Yeah. You can say it's a very short story. It just starts and ends right there. So the story is from a tribal tradition, and it comes from a rich tradition, because in this part of India, Eastern India, in a state called Odisha, there are like at least more than 50 tribes, tribal traditions in that area, all with very rich oral folk tradition, right? So and you can tell from the metaphors in the story that it comes from that kind of a culture where it's very close to nature, very tuned into kind of raw, primal energies of nature. So it's kind of, you can tell that. So from that tradition, so there's this story where there's an old couple, and they had no children and no land. And it's starting to feel like most of these folk tales start this way, where there's a poor old couple with no children. And the way they made a living was to go out into the jungle and forage for roots and tubers and fruit and whatever they got from the jungle, and they just ate them day after day, and that's how they lived. And when they were already old, the woman got pregnant. And, after several months, she gave birth to a child in a tuber patch in the jungle, right?
Tubers like potato.
Yeah. Wild tubers is not even like a cultivated patch. It's just a wild patch that you find in the forest, right? So she just gave birth to the child in the jungle. And then she called out to her husband and said, so this child's born now. What do we do? And the old man said, well, what do we do? If we have nothing to eat ourselves, it's difficult for us to make our ends meet. And we have nothing to back us up. We have no clothes for ourselves even. So how do we take care of the child? Let's just, so they both kind of talk this way and decide that let's just leave the child here and, hope that someone will come along and take care of him. So they leave the child at the tuber patch. And when they do that, the child begins to cry, right? And a tiger in the jungle hears the child crying. And he comes along and takes the child back to his cave. And the tiger feeds the child and raises him as his own. So this child grows up in a tiger's cave. And then, one day when the boy's grown up, the tiger thought that, it's time for the boy to marry. So I should go get a girl for him. And the tiger asks the boy, do you want me to find a girl for you? And the boy says, well, if you think I should marry, as you wish. And please find a girl, and I'll do just as you say. And the tiger says, all right. And he goes out and waits, by the roadside.
And the boy refers to him as father, right?
Yes, and the boy refers to him as father. He raises the boy as his own. And the tiger waits by the roadside to see if there's anyone coming along, and waits there until he finds a girl, and then grabs her and then takes her back to the cave. But while he's taking her back, he's kind of tempted, and he takes a bite of her ear. And then after nibbling the ear, he takes the girl back to the cave, calls the boy out, and says, I've got a girl for you. You should go take a look at her. And then the boy sees the girl, and he figures out that a part of her ear is missing. And he goes back to the tiger and says, Father, this won't do. The girl's got a piece of her ear missing, and that's not okay. Please find someone else for me. Someone undamaged. But then this happens like every time the tiger goes and finds a girl and brings her back. Every time there's always like a piece that the tiger gets tempted to kind of bite off. Once it's a hand, or sometimes it's a toe, sometimes it's a foot. And when he gets back to the boy, he always figures it out, and he says, no, this won't do. And finally one day he says, Father, I need to, this is not okay, having some part missing or the other. So please find a girl who is whole and undamaged and has no part missing, right? So that's what I want. So finally the tiger says, all right, and goes into the village where there's a wedding happening, crashes into the wedding, grabs the bride who's getting married, and takes her back to the cave. And then the whole wedding party is shocked and horrified at what just happened. But this time the tiger brings back the girl whole and doesn't bite her off or anything. And when he comes back and shows her to the son agrees. And for some time, this young man and the girl, they kind of live like man and wife, and they're quite happy, right? Until one day, what happens is, the young woman's chopping vegetables to, cook lunch or something, and she happens to sort of accidentally cut her finger, and the finger starts bleeding. So what she does is, pick some leaves from the floor and wipes her finger, wipes the blood, and throws away the leaves. And this is the time, when the leaves are just fallen there, the tiger somehow finds those leaves, smells the blood, licks it up, tastes it. And then he says, if the blood is this delicious, how tasty could the meat be? I think I'm going to eat them. And so he's thinking this, and it's not clear whether he thought this aloud, he actually ended up saying this, or whether it was just the look on his face that just gave it away. But the young man, the son, he knew that this is what the tiger had in mind. So he then knew that it was time, and they couldn't stay there any longer, right? So the same night, both the son and his wife, run away into the forest, and then they go and climb up a tree and sit up on the tree just to be safe. In the morning, the tiger comes to the cave and finds that, the son and his wife were not there. And the tiger starts looking for them. He searches for them, picks up their scent and sniffs up the trail that they left and finds their footprints. And the tiger goes off after them and looks for them everywhere, finally finds them sitting up on the tree. And then he climbs the tree to go, grab at them. And as the tiger came after them, the boy pulled out a sword and slashed at the tiger and cut right through him. And the tiger falls dead. Both the young man and his wife get down and they go to the girl's village and, her parents, where she was basically picked up from. And then they meet the parents of the girl who had given her up for dead. So they just are overjoyed to see she's alive. And she comes back safe and she has a husband. So they're really happy to have her back. And then, the young man and his wife settle down in the village and live there thereafter. So that's how the story ends.
Yay, thank you.
Yeah. So, what did you make of that when you heard it?
So I love the story, and the more times I hear it, the more I kind of like become fond of it. One of the things that kind of I've been taking some notes as you've been telling the story again here, and one of the things that really hit me was back in the previous talk where we talked about reading stories and then events in our lives through the lens of allegory versus symbol.
Yeah.
Right. Our bias is obviously to read everything as symbol, but even with a story like this, it's so well designed that it's hard to read it as allegory.
Yeah.
Right. So what are you going to say? Oh, you can't trust tigers. Those tigers are wild. You gotta kill them and like burn down the forest. It's like, no, the tiger saved the boy.
Yeah.
Right. Or are you going to say, well, like humans are better than animals? It's like, no, it's like the boy kind of did his own betrayal. He killed his own father, effectively, right, as far as he knew. So it is this sort of, tangled mess of like anguish when you read it as allegory, because there is no like clear right and wrong. There is no clear like, so you better do this or that.
Yeah.
And I found that, I'm by no means like a scholar of like world folklore mythology, right? But these tales that come from the folk of kind of earlier and earlier traditions and civilizations. I mean, this tale from the oral tradition, right, of this Eastern Indian forest dweller tribe is very old, right? It's very old.
Yeah, yeah.
So it comes from this like vintage of human history where it's like, there are thinkers who say like in that earlier vintage of human history, certainly pre-Abrahamic, right? Pre-Judeo-Christian, pre-Islam. The baseline was to read things as symbol, not as allegory.
Yeah.
Right, where you were in nature, everything in nature is eating everything else and trying to eat you, and you're eating too, and you're part of this larger symbol.
Yeah.
It's not this light versus dark thing, and light has to win, right? And so that was the first thing that struck me, the kind of intrinsic immune resistance power of an older style story like this that resists the impulse to read it allegorically.
Right.
Now, in modern times, we read a story, we can't figure out the allegory in 3 seconds, and we just discard it. We're like, I don't get that. It's a primitive tribe. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have electricity. They don't have running water. How absurd. Let's like move on with it and progress Western civilization, right? So that was the first thing. The second thing is, so if we read it as a symbol, for those of you who are unfamiliar with like the dream reading stuff we do, basically the high level, one of the only things you really need to know about how we read dreams here and stories and even real life events is that we use a lens, a mythopoetic lens, where we basically regard every major actor of the story or incident as being a symbol of a different part of your own interior self. right? That's not the only way to read the story. There are other ways, but the way we read it, just to get our kinds, the kind of nourishment that we like to get, that's the lens we use. So here, the old couple, right, is a part of you. The tuber patch is a part of you. The boy is a part of you. The tiger is most definitely part of you. The jungle. Each of the bride candidates is a part of you. The bride, the sword, and then the girl's village in the end also.
Yeah.
And so, so then, do you want me to keep going for a little bit? And
Yeah.
So basically, this to me was a story about masculine initiation. For those of you who have asked, this from that previous session, after we talked about initiation and the sacred masculine, we got questions pointedly from women saying, this really resonates. I see this in the men in my life, right? This lack of initiation. But also, I feel this in my own inner masculine. And the question is, how do I help facilitate or midwife the initiation of my own inner masculine as a woman? Right, which develops this very intricate, interesting sort of topic, which is like, the life cycles of your own inner masculine, own inner feminine, and how those, as they come forward, propel you forward in your like meta sort of overall initiations as a human being, right, through your cycles. It's a vast topic that I haven't even fully wrapped my mind around, right? But it's just fascinating. And so here I would regard the story arc of this boy as being symbolic of the story arc of one's own inner masculine. Okay. And so the way I read that, I'll just give the quick thumbnail, and then I want to hear what you have to, what your thoughts and feelings are, and then we'll dive in more. Is so this old married couple, they're kind of wild people, right? They're unrefined, they're uncivilized, they're like hunter-gatherers, they're not farmers.
Yeah.
They're not settled, agricultural, building shrines. They're like nomadic. I mean, they're not even nomadic, they're just jungle people.
Yeah.
Right? They live off of gathering wild tubers. They don't farm. And then spontaneously, unexpectedly, this emerging inner masculine like comes from them, is born from them.
Yeah.
Spontaneously, right? Because the old man and old woman are you, right? They're your own inner masculine, inner feminine, the last wave. And the last wave then gives rise to the next wave.
Yeah.
One side note here is, so your own inner masculine will go through multiple cycles and inner feminine of like, so for the inner feminine, it would be like girl, woman / mother, queen, and then crone, right? Saga, like elder wise woman. So if you have a part of you that is going through that cycle, like you may be like 32 years old, right? And you have a part of your inner feminine that is in the crone mode.
Yeah.
So you have this like old soul kind of energy, wisdom energy. And then as that in you dies and transforms, where does it go next? Right? It's quiet for a while, and then it comes back in the white phase, in the girl phase again.
Yeah.
Right? So over the course of an 80, 90-year-old life, you'll have multiple cycles of masculine and feminine, and these kind of ferment together somehow to sort of guide you through life in a way. It's hard to sort of try to put any more of a framework around it than even just saying that, because it's so magical. It's like trying to draw like lines and arrows and workflow boxes for like pregnancy or fermentation. It's not the energy of that thing, to sort of force it into linear lines. But it is this gorgeous thing. So this boy emerges out of the crone phase of the previous inner masculine and inner feminine. Inner masculine springs forth. And the old generation is literally like, we have no idea what to do with this force.
Yeah.
And if they were more civilized, they might start putting templates on it and whipping it and forcing it to learn its like ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. But every child, like even human child, when you come into life, right? You come into life with your flow of golden thread and Ziran and bliss and everything. But also you come bearing with you. This is when you're a human child and you're born, right? The legacy and inheritance of like 2 million years of humanity and wildness, of which the last, 2,000-3,000 years of civilized sort of patriarchal existence is like a tiny blip in the overall thing. So you come in, you're crying, you're like all this wild energy as a boy or a girl, right? And you're nice, sort of refined, well-providing parents, like they don't want this wild energy. They want a nice boy. They want a good girl, right? And that's the struggle where all this like templating happens, all this wounding happens, and then you have a healing and then sort of re-entry into your bliss kind of later in life.
Yeah.
Is that something horrible that needs to be repaired, or is that just the beauty of how the circumambulatory pattern works, right? How you view it will depend on whether you view it as symbol or allegory.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you could say, oh, such horrible parents, and how could they just leave the child abandoned in the forest and just go away? I mean, you can look at it that way, but there's as a symbol, it's like you said, it's so much about the wild energy and even wilder parents who trust that the energy will be taken care of one way or the other. Yeah.
So their reaction in the story is, we have no idea what to do with this kid. We're just we are people of the jungle. The jungle sustains us spontaneously too. Like we don't plant the tubers, we just find them, right? So they're like, we're just going to leave him. The jungle gave it to us. We're going to give it back to the jungle and let the jungle take care of it. Which is barbaric by our standards. But in the story, he actually gets taken care of.
Yeah.
Somehow magically. Now this is inner masculine, I wouldn't do that to a human baby. Inner masculine. So they leave him tellingly on the tuber patch. They put him back on the tuber patch, basically. And then this tiger comes. And this tiger is a part of you too. This tiger to me is of the jungle, a forceful, wild, savage, basically untamable force. And in this case, masculine force, because it's a masculine tiger. Emerges out of the jungle in much the same way that the boy and the old couple emerged out of the jungle. All of this comes out of the matrix of the jungle, right? And somehow, spontaneously, does not have the impulse to just eat the boy.
Yeah.
Right? There is an innocence in the boy, and there is an innocence in the tiger, where the tiger doesn't even occur to him that I could just eat this as like a little hors d'oeuvre, So they're both kind of in this sort of innocent boy sort of phase. And the tiger takes him in, plays the role of father. And this to me is this sort of where the process of initiation starts, where the inner masculine is basically left for dead. I have no idea, just get out. And he's left there. You think that's the end of the story. And this power, wild, masculine force spontaneously comes out of nowhere and acts unexpectedly, right? Unallegorically, right? Guided by this larger archetype of the overall jungle. And takes care of the boy and raises him, nurtures him, is father and mother, basically. And when he grows up, then the father continues this sort of pantomime, right, of the human world and says, well, it's time for you to get married. And this feeling of the tiger force going out and acquiring inner feminine. Now, again, we read this as the wild force of body inner masculine. So a tiger is an animal, right? So in dreams, we generally take animals as being symbolic of you, this part of you that is from the neck down.
Physical body.
What's that?
Yeah. The physical body and the
Physical
instinct.
body, instinct, intuition, sensuality, sexuality, hunger, savagery, brutishness, right? All of that is in the horse half of the centaur, right?
Right, yeah.
And because we are all centaurs, right? And so that is the force that drives you to bring inner masculine and inner feminine together. And so, and this tiger, who is like this yellow-orange color, right, very much evokes for me the power of the third chakra, Manipura chakra, like second and third chakra, like desire and Manipura. And just to take the example of like just a human man, because we're all like just familiar with men in the gross world, right? In a man's life, right, typically the first third or half of his life is driven by the power of Manipura and of Spadhisthana, right? Desire, ambition, competitiveness, the drive to win, the will to power. We literally call it, oh, that guy has a real fire in the belly. He's going to go far in this world, right?
Yeah.
And so he does this. He brings these elements of the inner feminine in. And at each point, he is unable to control himself and takes a bite out of the bride.
Yeah.
And it is this beginning of temperance. And there will be another symbol of temperance later on in the story. Of temperance and rising from Manipura to higher, right? This beginning gesture of temperance, when the boy says, no, that's not okay. No, that's not okay. Right? Take it back. And the boy is setting a boundary with his own forceful, intuitive, instinctual, sexual masculine.
Yeah.
Now you may ask, well, what happened to all these poor girls? Were they killed? I mean, these are all sort of parts of your own inner self, right? So there is one inner masculine, right? And there are different faces. So the tiger is a face of the inner masculine. The boy is a face of the inner masculine. The original father, the girls, the father-in-law, these are all different faces of the inner masculine. And all these brides are different faces of the singular inner feminine. So you can see it as like this kind of negotiation between inner masculine tiger and inner feminine, where the tiger says, I'll bring inner feminine in, but I will take a bite out of her. And basically it's this like overpowering raw masculine force within you, somehow degrading and stuffing down the full power and capability of the inner feminine. So you can have the inner feminine, but she can't hear. I'm going to bite her off. Or I'm going to bite her left hand off. So she doesn't, I'm taking away some part of her capability. So she is not full powered in our world.
Yeah.
And it is the human boy who says, that is not okay.
Yeah.
And the tiger's like, well, all right then, fine. And finally, the tiger learns some measure of temperance and brings a whole version of the inner feminine over. And all that works out. And then it's interesting, the thing that literally drives them out of the forest, not back into the state of the wild hunter-gatherers, but to the girls' parents who are farmers, who are civilized, who are in the village and civilization.
Yeah.
Right. So you start, you read these stories as symbols by looking at the start and end point, right?
Yeah.
Like in the Shiro withered trees blossom story, he started and his great sorrow was he had no children. And in the end, he still had no children. So it's like, okay, there's a problem. Here they started in wild form, childless. A child came right at the beginning of the story. Interesting, right? So that was immediately solved. But then what is the route? He spirals up back into sort of civilization. So he's higher than he started.
Yeah.
So the interim, what happened, had to be some kind of transformational initiation.
Yeah.
right? Like in Star Wars, when Luke starts as a farm boy and ends as like this powerful Jedi, what happened in between was an initiation, right? Many sort of cycles of initiation.
Yeah.
And so the physics of this interim initiation are basically that the trigger that like kind of breaks the water and starts the real sort of labor pangs of the womb of the jungle ejecting and birthing this next level of inner masculine, inner feminine.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the story, you don't have these wild people. You have this boy and girl, man and woman, right? Married, fully accepted, everyone's relieved, right? They thought she was dead, but she's come back even more radiant, right?
Yeah.
The trigger for the beginning of the labor pains is the tiger being pushed back a little in temperance and then coming back even further.
Yeah.
Right? Where, and this is a little bit nuanced, where he tastes the blood of the girl, and he loses control, and then the boy cuts him down. He cuts his own father down, basically. And then they go out back into civilization. They could have just continued staying in the jungle, but that act of cutting off, drawing a line in the sand, drawing a boundary, and pushing back the tiger force in you ejects you out back into like the next level of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you see this when men go from being men to kings, right? There's this added level of temperance that is not all this brute force. But what you get in return for that as king level, right, is you acquire the power to bless, which doesn't really do you much good in this profane lens, but in the sacred lens, it's like the power to bless is everything in a lot of ways. It's like the Shakespeare thing, Merchant of Venice, right? It's like, the quality of mercy is a blessing, right? Which blesses the receiver and the giver.
Yeah.
You don't really have that power until you reach that level of king.
Yeah.
And so for here, this interesting detail of the blood, the tiger bit the ears and hands and everything else of the previous brides, but he didn't taste blood back then.
Yes.
And the question is, why didn't he taste blood?
Yeah.
And the reason I came up with was this idea of so in many, many world cultures, even in Grimm Brothers, even in the Catholic sort of mythology, Christian, there is this sort of trio of colors that are symbolic of the life cycle of a human, but masculine and feminine principles within you as well.
Yeah.
And they are, in the feminine version, white, red, and black.
Yeah.
So, and then after black, you come back to white again. So you have multiple cycles of these. White is the white of girlhood, purity, virginity, innocence. Red is the red of the full flowering of motherhood, right? Regardless of whether you actually have biological kids, it is a sort of mother power, woman/queen phase of life. The blood of menses, the blood of childbirth, the full flowering. So that's the red. And then black is the black of the crone, and we've had a whole session on the crone. You use the same three colors in the masculine life cycle, except the first two colors are reversed. Masculine starts with red.
Right.
Red is the fire of Agni and fire in the belly. Red is the fire of like rage, right? The angry young man, right, is always in the first kind of third of life.
The untempered energy.
The untempered energy.
Yeah.
White hot, sort of untempered, unforged kind of steel, which only with tempering becomes the sharp, sort of useful sword, right? And we'll come to that.
Yeah.
And then white is the white of the sun at high noon. It's a pure white light. It's not yellow or red. It like casts no shadow. White is the white of a man's masculine's full power phase. White is the white of semen, right? Sort of full virility, generativity, ability to procreate. And then black is the black of the elder wise men. So the Gandalf, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Dumbledore, et cetera, et cetera. And regardless of your gender, your own inner feminine and your own inner masculine will have multiple cycles of these over the course of a regular biological, human life.
Yeah.
So when the tiger bit the girls, he didn't taste blood because they were in the white phase. Only after inner masculine and inner feminine are joined within you, the blood begins to flow. That's why only after, when she's cutting vegetables, as the wife, everything's established, she cuts her finger and blood flows. That's why the tiger only tastes this full power of the feminine. After, before he bit, there was no blood. That's how I kind of read into it. And so that's the thing that triggers him and says, I mean, it's like a, you can almost think of it as like a husband, like, you know, in the first year of his marriage, realizing that, you know, he can't just be the same as before. Things do need to change. And there's this sort of tempering of his own inner tiger, right? And you can say this for women in sort of different situations as well. But that's when he, you know, he just shifts in his seat a little bit. He just has this shifting of intention. And the boy immediately knows. And he says, we got to get out of here.
Yeah.
The tiger chases them to the edge of the forest. And then this second act of temperance. The first was, no, that's not okay. You cannot do this to the inner feminine. Go, when you have the power and temperance to bring back a whole one, then we will talk about fuller integration and getting to the next level within us, right?
Yeah.
Here is this next more savage level of boundary setting and temperance, where he pulls out a sword and cuts the tiger in half, basically kills the tiger. When you see death in a dream, it's a symbol of transformation. So the tiger power is transformed. Right. Because in the story, when I read the version you gave me, you know, the guy is quick. He has the reflexes of a tiger.
Yeah.
He is a tiger. And then the sword comes out of nowhere. It's like they're like jungle people. Where the hell did he get the sword? Yeah. And magically, the sword to me is a symbol of the forged temperance, right? Red going into white. So as the feminine goes from white to red, the masculine goes from red to white. Which is why, you know, mothers and their sons, right, will often have all this conflict because they're actually passing each other. Right, they're just changing colors to the opposite. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
And I just wanted to kind of, because when you talked about the sword here, wanted to say that it is surprising and interesting that, you know, the woman is cutting vegetables in the jungle. All along, they've been jungle people. So there's a tiny knife that appears at that time, and then there's a sword that appears at the right moment. And with the appearance of the knife and the sword is the first glimpse of them becoming civilized people. There is that somehow invisibly that transformation has happened, and we kind of don't even know it has happened. It's like how they do it with mirrors. It's just happened. Yeah. We suddenly come to know this is.
Well, I love that. That's brilliant. And I wonder if she maybe just had the knife on her when she was taken in from civilization. Yeah. This little bit of seed of the metallurgical art. Yeah. And I love how the feminine is using the brute force of temperance. Right? It's force. I mean, I'm biased by, you know, influenced by like the Celtic tradition, right? So in the Arthurian myths and the Fisher King, a sword is a symbol of like brute force hacking. And a lance, right? A lance, which is more like a giant like pin or needle, is more of a symbol of judgment and discernment, because it's a very precise sort of hit instead of just hacking arms and legs off, right? Yeah. So here she's using that power to nourish. Yeah. Because she's chopping veggies. Yeah. And he's using the power to protect and set boundaries. Yeah. Right, which is one of the sort of native sort of functions of the inner masculine. So he cuts the tiger down with also brute force, but tempered brute force. It takes discipline to forge a sword, to sharpen it, to keep it sharp, and to wield it in a skillful way. right? None of that is natural.
And to know the right moment of the slash and cut, like when do you actually wield it in that way?
Well, that's the part. I mean, the fact that he can beat a full-grown tiger with one stroke belies the fact that he also, with this human temperance, also has taken in, though, the quickness and forcefulness and intuitive, instinctive timing of the tiger.
Yeah.
Because he is the son of the tiger.
Yeah.
So he's taken in all of this good stuff from the jungle and the tiger, and yet he's wielding it in a way where he is able to literally cut the umbilical cord. And then after that, he goes into the white, right? The white phase of going back into the outer world. And the overall here, I mean, there's more to say, but I just want to say one more thing and then kind of kick the ball back to you. The overall sort of symbol, not allegory, right, but symbol of masculine initiation within a person here is that until there is a tempering of the red energy, there is no initiation to be had. The boy always remains a boy. The boy never sort of graduates to being a man. And in many sort of traditional cultures, like in Africa, I think like the Maasai, right, will say that pre-initiation, no one will marry a man that has not been initiated.
Right.
Like they'll have sex with him, if he wants, for like pleasure and everything, mutual pleasure. But no woman will marry him and actually live in a hut with him. And the elders basically say, all of that fiery energy before it's been tempered and initiated and shaped, you put that like basically nuclear warhead in a hut alone with a woman, the whole thing will just burn down. Right? He will burn down too. And so there is this sort of definite cut line between a boy and a man. And a man can be 50 years old and still be an uninitiated boy man. To me, one of the classic signs of a boy man is that his appetite consumes everything. The fire of his appetite and desire burns everything. There is no cut line. There is no temperance. And if there is no cut line, the tiger follows you around and consumes everything. And this involves a very deep loss and sacrifice. I mean, you can imagine, this boy, initiation, the impulse to initiation is natural and very, very strong. Right? In the inner city, when you see like boys who have been raised without fathers forming into gangs, right? One way of reading that is that they are attempting to initiate each other. Right? They crave that. And so it is a very sort of powerful hunger in your inner masculine, but also in like, a human boy. But it is also a choice, right? At the critical moment, the boy has a choice. He chooses to stay with the girl and like forsake his father. But he didn't have to. He could have said, well, we already like rejected like 6 or 7 of these inner feminines. We can reject another one and I'll just stay with my dad who raised me, who's taught me everything I know, and I wouldn't be alive without him. How can you ask me to cut, my own father down? And I will lose all the sort of pleasures of that force to be in the jungle, do whatever the hell I want. Barge into weddings, grab more feminines, right? And the boy instinctively makes this choice. In the story, there's no discussion between him and the bride. There's no like anguish, and she's like, well, come on, I love you, stay with me. And he's like, oh, okay, I will. It is completely on his own, instinctive, and it just happens in one stroke.
And it's at the level of kind of leadership by the young man, because he tells the wife that it's not safe to stay anymore. He sets the boundaries right from the beginning, and if we pay attention to the signs right at the beginning when the tiger starts to bite off from the girls he brings, if the boy hadn't set the boundaries, there were early signs of what was to come, right? And if he hadn't set the boundaries then, than what you said, the scenario where he would just had chosen to stay with the father and let this kind of violation just keep going on without having the power to do anything about it, right? But the boy shows the kind of leadership right from beginning, where he decides, he discerns, and he chooses what's okay, what's not okay. So it feels like this masculine power and the temperance, and this is why it leads to, you know, the stage of the king, because, you know, to have the kind of leadership of a king, you need this kind of judgment and
Right.
discernment at the stage. So that was very telling for me in the story, where he had that judgment right from the beginning, when he made all those choices and set the boundaries right at the start.
I mean, the other aspect here also is that the jungle is the realm of the exile. Right?
Yeah.
From the point of view of the girl's parents, this is the realm. I mean, even the initial couple, old couple, this is the realm of the exile. And so the boy is exiled, so those of you who do healing, right? Like a lost board member in the jungle.
Yeah.
And not as an allegory, but just as a symbol to like put us into reflection. What happens to a lost board member when they're in the jungle for that long? Because those of you who have recovered your lost board members, you know they've been out there for like 30 years. What happens to a lost board member that has been raised by a primal force? If you're 35 now, your lost board member is 35 too.
Yeah.
Right? They may not know it because they haven't been able to read a book or get on the internet or look at a clock for 30 years. They've been in exile.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do you come back from that? Right? And this story to me says this talented kind of primal inner masculine force within you has his own intelligence. He's not just, first of all, he's not just a dumb animal, but even here, the tiger itself is a fatherly, you know, Zeus kind of figure, right? Who has intelligence, who goes out and does the masculine thing, aggresses outside of the realm of the exiles to bring back what is needed in his limited vision for like, well, I don't know much, but I do know you need a feminine to be paired with you.
Yeah.
So he's just trying his best, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, this boy and girl, really this young man and young woman, because they are married, and he has completed his initiation. When they come out of the forest, it's lovely that the girl's family like welcomes both of them back.
Yeah.
Right. And this could have become a sort of multi-episode epic, right? If the father was like, well, no, I'm like the opposite of the tiger, and I'm not okay with this tiger trained masculine.
Right.
And he tries to maybe like take a bite symbolically out of the boy and send him back, and the girl would be like, no, you know, and she does her own initiation from there, right? Yeah. But the thing is, like, I've just run into so many cases where people, and there's nothing wrong with this, it's just the archetypes that we've been given that have survived in our society, where people will talk about, oh, my inner child, right? Which is valid. It makes sense in a lot of ways. It's a very powerful archetypal system to use. But in this kind of case, you know, I don't always push back, but sometimes I'm just like, people say, well, I've already done my inner child work. I don't know what I need to do here. And one of the things is like, if you come in with a preset notion that the thing that's lost is a child, you either won't find it, or you'll find it, and that's the only lens through which you'll see. And I guess the counterpoint to that, my point here is that what you find that has been exiled is not always a child. Right? I'm not saying it's never a child. I'm saying the way to find out is not to come in with, you know, the sort of theory that you've been given only. Right? If the theory gets you to even like the negotiating table of figuring out what's on the other side of the table, fabulous.
Mm.
Right? And maybe you'll spend a few rounds of circumambulation looking for a child and only talking to children within you that you find. Fabulous. But the jungle is bigger than that.
Mm.
The jungle is bigger than that. There are tigers in the jungle. There are tubers in the jungle. There are strapping young men who have fully completed their initiation, ready to come out, and as your son-in-law, right, with your daughter, and take over the village, fully formed, ready to go.
Yeah.
Right? He's not this helpless 3-week-old that you left on the tuber patch. There's stuff that has happened on the other side. And when we work in healing, I mean, there are no rules to this. I mean, the only sort of survival mechanism, orienteering kind of method is to go in and talk to whoever you find, right? And ask them. If you find a tiger, you interview the tiger. If you find a boy with a sword, you interview the boy with the sword. So that really sort of brought this aspect of it forward for me as well.
Yeah. So I had this question that came up for me, and you've already talked about one aspect of it where you said how well balanced the story is, in that there is this old wild couple, hunter-gatherer couple at the beginning, and as soon as the emerging masculine comes out, as soon as the child is born, they go into the background. Now we don't know anything about what happened to them after that. They just exit out of the story. But at the end, we find the girl's parents, the similar archetype, but these are farmers, and they live in the village, and they're the welcoming, nourishing, kind of parents who then give them shelter and take them back in. So it's like a diagonally opposite kind of a thing.
Yeah, it kind of goes like this.
Yeah. So I kind of wonder if it's also, the story is also talking about this entire process, the transformation of the parent archetype from the jungle, from the exile state to the fully integrated state. So is that an arc that the story is showing as well?
I love that. Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense the way you're describing it, because, to me, right, the old wild couple is the girl's parents' couple.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the equivalence. So while within the jungle, in the realm of a lost board member, right, he is going through this transformation and initiation. As that is happening, this transformation is happening as a mirror to it as well. Right. So if he didn't kill, I'm making this up, right? So if he didn't kill the tiger, he's like, okay, I'm just gonna sort of block you enough. You'll still break out of the cave where I put up the barrier, but it'll be enough time for us to run away. So the tiger is untransformed, and we know he's able to break out into the village. Undealt with, ungrieved.
Yeah.
Because I could always go back to the tiger. Right. This cutting is like the burning of the ships. You're not going back.
Correct.
You will have grief about that.
Yeah.
Right? Grief about losing your father. Grief about the fact that I killed my father. Right. In the story, and so because if that didn't happen, you could imagine them coming out to the outside village, outside world, where the father is not accepting of him.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's another phase where he needs to go back and deal with the tiger and reconcile in one way or another.
Yeah.
So because this flowed all the way through, it's kind of how it appears to me.
Yeah, the full cycle. It was very telling to me that, when the boy, decided to kind of kill the tiger, he killed the tiger. He just didn't decide. He just killed the tiger once and for all. There was this, such a decisive, dramatic action about it, right? In the entire story, that stood out for me the first time I read it. It was everything else was fantasy tale. There is a tiger nurturing and nourishing a boy, but and bringing a girl to marry. What's this thing going on? But that one dramatic moment where there is that telling moment when that transformation has happened. You could tell just by reading the story. And what then also brought my attention was that until that moment, the tiger went in pursuit, right? Sniffed them up from the cave, tracked their footprints, went looking for them, climbed up the tree. So there is this indication that if you don't confront the transformation that is going on, if you try to run away from it, there is no running away. It will follow you around everywhere. And it is this instinctive beast that can sniff you up at the end of the world.
Right.
You can't
no hiding from the tiger.
There's no hiding from it. Right?
There's no hiding from the tiger.
There's no hiding. So the only way to move to the next phase is to set that boundary and say, this is it. I'm done with this phase. And I'm now moving on to the next phase. So that was very powerful for me the first time I read it. It was like, wow. I mean, you simply cannot turn your back like we always do. Like, I can't deal with this right now. I'm going to take time off and come back to it later, or maybe never, if it suits me. and then you realize it just starts eating into all the other aspects of your life, and you simply can't run away from it. So that was very powerful.
What else?
So that's the one point that I want to make, because I think you brought this up at the beginning of the talk, is now that I've told this story, and I want to go back to, the beginning of the masculine series, as we call it now, is the story and song, and then the Japanese folk tale, and then this one. The thread that I see is that in the first story, there was a task set for the masculine. Like, there is the masculine's job is to take the story and song out into the world. There is a vision, there is a narrative. This needs to be done. Is the masculine up to it? The story didn't talk about that. The man in the story realizes what has happened, but we don't know if he's figured out what he needs to do and what is going to happen. So there is this kind of suspended state that story left us with. And then there was the next story, the Japanese folk tale, where we clearly see a kind of an imbalance in the masculine of the story. The disengagement, the incomplete transformation. Everybody suspended, the evil masculine in prison, not moving anywhere, the Duke with the miraculous power with the old man, but really not doing anything substantial with it. There's a kind of suspended state. Again, we didn't know if the masculine had figured out what was the next step to take. And then we come to this story.
Well, I mean, also, so what we often find when we do the healing stuff, especially on the dream side, is you'll have a series of dreams, either all in one night or over the course of weeks or months.
Yeah.
And you can draw sort of equivalences of symbols across different dreams, right?
Right.
So if we had this would be an extraordinary example, but if we had this series of 3 dreams.
I'm looking at a series of 3 dreams now.
Yeah, if you look at it as a series of 3 dreams, what will happen is, and we just had this in our Friday session 2 days ago, and a couple of examples of this. The first dream will give a message, and then we'll beg a question.
Yeah.
So this, but what about this? And then the second dream will tend to answer that question, like zoom in more detail and give the extra detail on what's going on, and then beg another question, and then so on and so forth, right? Until, I mean, you could surf it for as many dreams as you can stand, and then you'll fall off your board at some point, right? And it'll still come, it'll still come after you, because the tiger will always come after you. So in that first story, the question, of course, now is, what's the guy going to do now?
Yeah.
Right? Is he going to put on the coat and slippers and go out, or what's going to happen? The
Yeah.
second story answers the question by saying, if you had these in spontaneous dream sequence, which basically we are, because we're pulling them from your intuition and we're presenting them. So everyone watching LSS is basically having this dream sequence right now. You can read it like that.
Yeah.
And the second dream answers the question, which is, the inner masculine has the coat and slippers, and the issue is that there's no boundary.
Yeah,
there's no boundary between inner masculine and inner masculine.
Yeah.
And the animal side, Shiro, the dog, is completely suppressed.
Yeah.
Right, is completely suppressed, and tries to come back in the form of the mortar and the ashes and everything. But it's not just I can give you all the superpower you want, but you need to have boundaries, and everything else needs to be in balance too. It's like when we talked about, like when you and I have had the conversations about like doing a program on archetypal manifestation, right? And what would the prerequisites of that be? Like how much healing, how much bliss, and the concern was that if you haven't done healing and bliss before archetypal manifestation, I'm just making your magic wand more powerful, but you're just going to use it to like do all this sort of stuff that's probably not good for you in the first place. Right? It's like just giving you more rope to hang yourself with. So here it's like the old man has all these superpowers, but it's still like not, he still doesn't have a child at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So then the question that you can say that begs is, so what the hell? What's wrong with this guy? Right? Why isn't the child there? And in this next dream, it picks right up. So what is the solution to the Shiro old man issue? The solution is initiation, basically. The old man, even though he's 70 or 80, is uninitiated.
Yeah. Can't hear you. I think the sound just went off. Is it on mute? Okay. Let me see if it's the same thing on Facebook. Yeah. Old man has had enough reprimanding. You guys have been going on and on at me since last week. No, I still can't hear you. What just happened? Would you like to refresh? Yeah. He's about to reconnect.
Okay, how's that? Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
All right. Sorry, my AirPods died. That's how I'm like listening to you.
Right.
And of course, it messed up. Okay, everyone can hear me again. Thank you. So where were we? So yeah.
The boundary.
So the question the Shiro story begged is like, so how do we heal the state of affairs, right?
Right.
And the way you heal it is through initiation. So the old man is the old man of the tuber patch. And over the course of a human life, right, my old man Shiro phase will die. And I will have my whatever the story is called, the tiger's adopted son phase will begin.
Yeah.
Right. So I will go from black to red on my masking.
Yeah.
And this dream will be a diorama of what that phase is looking like. So if I go into that spontaneously because I'm looking at the dreams and everything, then when I'm in that phase, I will tend to have a dream like this.
Yeah.
Okay. And then everything we're talking about here, Shiro, the dog, comes back as the tiger.
The tiger. Yeah.
Right. Not sort of just happy and helpful anymore, but forceful and taking control of the situation.
Yeah.
Right. Because in a way, Shiro is the one that you have abandoned because of bad boundaries. And so this next dream picks up right from there where you've just abandoned the boy. And the only thing that will make this work again is that the tiger needs to, Manipura, fire in the belly. So the tiger, if he were in the Japanese village, would have eaten everyone, right? The Duke included. It would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
So going through more of that initiation, and then you go back into the village, and you end up with a fully integrated inner masculine and inner feminine, right? And the presumption is that with all the family and everything, they will be fruitful and multiply and prosper as well. So I think that honestly, when we look at this 3 dream sequence, it may be like, oh, this is amazing. This is this incredible thing. Do we want to make a movie out of this? Do we want to make a podcast? And on one level, you could say, yeah, absolutely. It's definitely good enough to be developed into that. But at the same time, it's in the work we do, right? Every week when we're doing live group advising, you see examples of this basically every week in the work with the advisees that we do. And it's just, I don't know, it's just unbelievable. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. And it's also kind of time-based and in a sense ephemeral, I think, because it comes out at that moment because that's the message for the moment.
Correct.
But then just vaporizes after that. So it holds that significance for that moment is how I feel every time I read a story, because the next time I read a dream, it reads very different to me. It's like the same old dream, but it's come back when I'm reading it again. It's come back at that moment, and then it holds new meanings and new significance and new everything, and it feels very different from the last time I had the memory of it. So it's very time-based, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, with everything going on in the world right now, that has been going on for the past 100 years, basically. The question that arises for me is why is this story or sequence of stories, as opposed to any other sequence in, the advising work we've been doing in the last 6 months, why is this sequence of stories injected itself into live sacred space now for the larger kind of, realm? And one way of thinking about that is and this fits with some dreams I've had recently on a personal level, where, we know the situation in the larger world right now, right? It is, the sort of signal wound of our time is the failure of masculine initiation.
Yeah.
Right. We have just among humans, all these men running around, running companies, running organizations, running countries, who are painfully, agonizingly uninitiated.
Yeah.
To the point, and they're burning everything. Their appetites are consuming everything. Their anger is consuming everything. But also, when you look at some of these leaders, it's not we talked about this in the concept of blessing and curse in the American racism talk, right, back in May.
Yeah.
Where it's so they are the oppressors and doing all this stuff to everyone else. And yet when you look at them, it's clear they're not happy.
Yeah.
They themselves are in deep wounded suffering. Yeah. Because there is no way to really soothe the wound of being an uninitiated man and woman too, right? But I'll just tell you from my own experience, there is no other solution to being an uninitiated male other than to seek initiation, one way or another, right? It's a hole that will never be filled by anything from the outside.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the case of feminine initiation and women's. I mean, I've said this before, but it's harder to mess with feminine initiation or female human initiation, although we're trying, because female initiation is more punctuated by changes in the body.
Yeah.
So that's harder to mess with, although we're doing our damnedest to try, right? So anyway, it's yeah. So if anything's going to save us, it's going to be women. That wasn't clear from like everything we say every week. It's like that's our bias.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that. Thank you for stringing the three together. That's brilliant. Yeah. I totally agree.
No, thanks for reading, Artie. Would you like to share the exercise while I move back into the background?
So let's do that. Okay, great. Thank
you.
So thank you, Gary. That was an amazing story. Just great job as always. So then the exercise we thought of when we were sort of reflecting on the story. Let me just do a quick peek to make sure the streams are still working. Okay, great. The exercise to think about between now and next week, and again, no pressure to participate. Just do it only if you want and only if you feel so moved. But the exercise we thought of is to sort of sit for a few minutes with pen and paper and just reflect in your own life, regardless of your gender, right? Within your own life, within your own inner self. What has been the equivalent of the tiger in your life and in your inner kingdom or queendom? Okay. This is the raw, primal, self-intelligent force of your own inner masculine power, right? Regardless of what gender you are, whether you're a man, woman, whatever gender you identify with. The inner masculine, quote unquote, force within you that has basically at the critical moment saved you, and that has been absolutely necessary for you to live and progress and proceed. But then you need to find at some level temperance with it, balance, because you've been forced into finding temperance with it, or you willingly come to terms with it and come into balance with it. And in the most extreme cases, have had to transform it forcefully, right, with the sword of temperance, and just sort of let the chips fall as they may and figure it out from there going forward. And so the question is, what is this tiger within you? How do you feel about the balance you have struck? Or have you even struck a balance? And is the balance you have struck the right one? Is there grief over the tiger? Is the tiger going to come back? Right? When we say the boy killed the tiger, we mean he transformed the force of the tiger. Just like the old man and old woman transformed into the boy and then transformed into the girl's kind of parents. As a force, right, the inner masculine force within you is unkillable. It doesn't die until you die, right? And even then, who knows? A la golden thread, right? So even though you've transformed this instantiation of this tiger itself as a force is still of the jungle. The jungle has produced tigers and will continue to produce tigers. The jungle itself, in a way, is the tiger. And is the tiger going to come back? Has it come back? And what form is it in this time around? Okay, so that's the exercise to try, only if you want, just for fun. If you feel so moved to like share things that have come up for you doing this exercise or even reflecting on the story, please send us email. And then also, of course, if there are stories that have resonated with you and you'd like us to consider sort of reading them in a session like this, email them over to me and we'll take a look at them and see what happens from there. Okay. All right. So that's all we had for the session. And now I'll go ahead and close our sacred space. Our next session is next Sunday. It's free, open to the public. Please feel free to invite others. If you have questions, post them in the chat, post them in the question section of Crowdcast, and we'll gather them up for a Q&A session later on. You have the green button in Crowdcast and a link in the text of the live post on Facebook for you to click and join next Sunday's session now. I've actually chained a few of them, so you can join the next few Sundays now if you want. And then with all that, I'll now close our session. I hereby close this session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for holding this space with me and with us. And thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment of this shared sacred space with us. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of fear, free of threat, and free of the undue control of others. Have a great day, have a great week, and I will see you in the next session. Thank you. Thank you.